Alright guys, so in this video I'm going to go over alright guys, so in this video I'm going to go over basically a table that I've created for productivity. Just what I think are the 5 sort of sections of productivity in order of productiveness. And it's very interesting, looking forward to getting into it. But before I do, I just want to talk about why I think this is necessary. So basically, I think, it's funny because you go through school and you don't really learn anything about productivity. All you do is just do what people tell you. If there's a bit of homework you need to do, you get in trouble if you don't do it, so you do it. You know what I mean? There's nothing very deep about work that you learn. You don't really learn to work for yourself, and as a result, you don't really learn how to do stuff that really connects to who you are. And most people have an experience where they, at some point in their life, they will want to do something that no one else is going to tell them to do. And that's because it's something that they want to do themselves. And so they have to incentivize themselves. And what they'll realize is that they can't do it because they haven't learned the sort of productivity tactics. And more than anything else, they just don't really know what they how they want to set out their life in the first place. So you end up with this really frustrating thing where you want to do deep, good productive work, but you just can't get yourself to do it. And it's depressing. You're in school or you're in work or whatever, and you keep thinking, oh, I wish I had more free time. And then you have a bit more free time, and you don't do what you want to do with your free time. And it's a very frustrating cycle. And I think understanding a bit more about kind of the different levels of productivity and kind of how you wanna sort of arrange your time effectively is really key. So here it is, basically. It's just a list of 5 different sort of sections. I'm going to go through each section in turn. I'm going to describe it very briefly, and then I'm just going to get into kind of more detail about each one, and kind of because they're all going to interact with each other in a very beautiful way. So you see, I've got it as it's got a positive and a negative axis, and that's effectively because I think there are unproductive tasks and there are productive tasks. And then there's a kind of middle ground, which is neither productive nor unproductive, but more of a kind of rest and recovery thing. But I think within both, there are very unproductive tasks and not so unproductive tasks. Tasks that are actually not the end of the world if that's what you're doing with your free time. And then you've got really productive, deep work tasks. And then you've got kind of, decently productive tasks that it's still good if you're doing them, but it's not quite this level. Okay guys, so I'm gonna start with this, which is the most unproductive thing, and I think ideally you want to spend 0 hours doing any of these tasks. Really, if you want to sort out your productivity, you want to just get rid of basically spend 0 time doing them, which I know is a bit ambitious, especially something like Instagram, dating apps, social life comes into play with these. But I think if you really want to be hardline and actually get some decent productivity going, this has got to go, basically. Sorry, this has got to go. And so yeah, I've called this the death zone for that reason. And it's because basically, any time that you spend in this zone where you're being unproductive is going to impact any of these other tasks. Because what these tasks do that is so deadly is they really compromise your ability to focus. Because like all of them, what they do is they just flood your brain with dopamine, and you're going through like lots of different sources of stimuli in one go. So you'll see, with all of these, let's take TikTok for a classic example. You'll see one video which is like some funny meme, and then the next you'll see some deep quote about stoicism, and you scroll it again and it'll be I don't know, some let's be honest, it'll be some pornography or something like that, and then you scroll it again and it's some history or whatever. You get just a huge variety of stuff on TikTok, and it just kills your brain. It just kills your brain because it's just overwhelming for the brain, and it can't really focus after spending too long in that kind of environment. So anyway, what's the stuff's in the death zone? Well, obviously you can see for yourselves. I've already talked about TikTok. By the way, I just want to say I'm sorry that it's kind of on a notebook, but I'm a bit old school with this stuff. I like writing. I know my handwriting. People always say my handwriting is very hard to read, which it is. Let's be honest. But I'll read it out for you guys just in case you can't read it. So on the top we've got porn, TikTok, Instagram. Instagram's a funny one because you could technically like go on Instagram messages or whatever for 5 minutes, but sooner or later you're going to end up on like the sort of reels section, and it's just basically just as bad as TikTok. Dating apps. So this is funny. I do think dating apps are, if you're being really hard line, I do think dating apps are in the sort of death zone. I think there are ways that you can use dating apps that are positive. Hamza talks about this actually. What Hamza recommends you do with dating apps is you just get the paid version so that you'll automatically get matches, and then that basically takes away like half the time you spend on it. You can just look at the matches you've already got and message the people that you're interested in. It's like sort of an entrepreneur's way of doing dating apps. So I think stuff like that. Obviously, your dating life is important. Like you need to spend time on it. But I think really, if you're being honest, most of the time you spend on dating apps is just super bad for you because you're just going through lots of profiles. So again, you just get loads of variety, and you're getting sort of dopamine hit after dopamine hit because like you're looking at lots of beautiful women on a dating app. I don't think it's a very natural way to sort of consume looking at lots of beautiful women. So yeah, bit of a some might say it's a bit harsh, but I do think dating apps fall into this category by and large. Obviously, like I say, if you want to use it in kind of Hamza's way, then that's fine. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be dating or anything like that. Like I think that's really important. And just kind of encompassing all these together is basically the idea of doom scrolling. So just anything where you're sort of flicking through your phone mindlessly, you're consuming all this stuff that is getting in your head, but you're not really retaining it. Anything like that is basically the death zone. And it's funny because all these things in the death zone, you generally will go on it for just, you'll tell yourself that you just go on it for 5 minutes. But you'll end up going in it for at least 20 minutes, up to 2 hours, 3 hours, The death zones are real, if nothing else, it's just an enormous time sink of your time, because it really sucks you in, where you'll unintentionally end up spending lots of time together. And this is really the key to productivity, I think. It's not so much that you're doing hard work or you're making a certain amount of money, although that is really important as well. But what I think is more key is just the intention behind your day. You go to bed at the end of the night and you think, what do I want to do today? I want to do that. Okay. And you wake up the next day and you do it. That's really what I see as the heart of productivity. And the death zone is just the antithesis of this, because it will just make you change your day. You know, if you open up Instagram and start scrolling for 5 minutes, you're going to be on there for at least 20 minutes. But I think the other thing about the death zone that's really key is, and this is really the most important thing, is that it just tanks your focus. And, you know, even if we ignore like the time it's taking you away from what you're really doing, by the time you get to do any of these other more productive tasks, which is anything else on this list, you can have a harder time doing it because your focus is just going to be completely tanked. It's going to be really hard. So that's the other thing. And the last thing I'll say about the death zone, and this again I think is very crucial, is it's not actually very enjoyable. You don't really derive a very high sense of enjoyment from doing it, if you're really being honest. Like, here's actually an interesting experiment for you guys to try. Kind of meditation exercise, I guess, is just close your eyes and just imagine scrolling on TikTok. And it's quite hard to do because it's such an intense thing that you're going through when you're on TikTok. But if you actually get into a stage where just you're imagining, okay, I'm scrolling, okay, what do I see? And you sort of imagine things that typically pop up in your TikTok. You, at least for me, I find it's actually quite an unpleasant experience to imagine myself scrolling on these social media apps, because I think it's because your brain's not really meant to do it, and it's kind of, you know, it's a bit of a forbidden fruit, TikTok, because it's like, you know, you shouldn't be on it, so you feel incentivized to do it. Exact same thing as porn. But really, I do think you derive, because it's just so unhealthy for you, if you're really being honest, you don't actually derive a huge sense of satisfaction from it. Now, do I think there are some sort of short form content that's like a real work of art? I do, I really do, and it's a bit of a conundrum. Like, I think that guy, Jack Joseph, like Cole Anderson, these kind of TikTok comedians that you'll know about if you're from the UK, like, really funny guys. I think they're really talented. And I think any of their TikToks, really, especially like the really popular ones, are a work of art in and of themselves. Like, I do think that. And I think they thrive off that sort of short form content. So it's not necessarily the content itself that's the problem, but I think the way of just, especially on like a For You page, where you're just constantly looking at just these random things put together, if we're being really honest, it's not actually that enjoyable for the human brain, because it's so detrimental. And we kind of, you know, if you're not really mindful, you're not really aware that you're not enjoying it, but really you're not, you know. And I think it's the exact same thing with porn. You know, it's really funny. I used to think that porn was like a really sort of dangerous thing, like and like I still do think it can do dangerous things. But I've changed my view slightly to porn in that I actually don't think it's as formidable as I thought. I think it can be formidable to people. Like, you can get caught, you can get addicted to it. But it's not actually, I think it's not actually very convincing in and of itself, you know. Like, once, I think you can reach a state of enlightenment about your sexual desire, you know, and kind of where your sexual desire actually comes from, where porn just stops becoming sort of compelling to you, full stop. And, you know, I'm not saying I'm there yet by any means. Like, I still think I've got a long way to go, but I am interested in exploring this because I do think I'm onto something. Like, these people like David Dada, you know, who talk about sort of how to circulate sexual desire across your body and stuff like that. I do think once you have a more enlightened relationship with your sexual desire and the sexual nature of your body and your mind, it stops actually becoming very compelling, pornography. And I don't really think I'm in a position where I can be like, oh, this is what I'm going to do. This is how you get out of like porn addiction, whatever. But I do think, because I do think I'm still quite early on in kind of like making sense of sexual desire and circulating it through my body and stuff like that. So I do want to talk about it later on in this channel, but just to get back to what I'm saying, generally, I think all this stuff is just not really enjoyable if you're really being honest. Like in the moment, and just really, again, this comes back to the idea of productivity. You want to sort of, most people want to enjoy their life in some sense, and all this stuff in the death zone, it's addictive, yes, but it's not really enjoyable. So I think the first task for you to do, if you want to really want to double down your productivity, is just get rid of all of these things, you know. And we'll get onto the deeper work tasks later, but basically, like I say, all of these things, if you get rid of these, without doing any active effort, you'll find it much easier to be productive and do the productive tasks. Okay, so that's the kind of death zone. The next thing is the sort of unproductive indulgences. So this is kind of the stuff you do when you want to sort of treat yourself a bit. And it's funny talking about treating yourself in the context of this modern self-improvement movement, because a lot of people are very sort of anti it, you know, they just want to work and whatever. And I've got a lot of time for that, but I do think you should learn how to kind of, when to sort of let up, basically, and let yourself to have a little bit of indulgence. And the reason for that is because if you don't, especially if you're quite early on in really making a productive life, you're gonna end up doing these tasks at some point. So what, just to kind of go into a bit more depth, so what are the unproductive indulgences? So this is stuff like TV, Netflix, long form content on YouTube, having a cup of tea, you know, a nice sugary cup of tea. There are a few things that I think I could add to this that I haven't put, stuff like listening to music, you know, calling a friend, you know, even like, I don't know, just doing some drawing or something like that. You know, stuff that, and it depends because some of this stuff is like, let's say you're a film critic, then TV is probably going to be more in this category or whatever. But this is basic stuff that doesn't really have any impact on your productive output, but it's still very key for, but it's not like damaging to do it as it is the stuff in the death zone tasks, because it doesn't quite stimulate you as much. Now, I know people like Hamza, you know, are very against like watching TV. You know, they say, you know, oh, just it's a distraction, like cut it out. And I do get that, I do understand it, but I think there's like watching like some crappy program on Netflix, and I mean like literally just watching it without looking at your phone or anything, just sitting down and watching some film, even if it's not the most intellectually stimulating thing in the world, it's still a million miles better than going on TikTok or watching porn. I think the gap between those two things is so huge, like honestly. And I think the mistake you can make if you want to become more productive is to bunch these two together. So whereby you think that watching TV or watching Netflix is as unproductive as going on TikTok or watching porn. Because I think the gap between both of those things is just enormous. And I think basically, just to sort of link this to the death zone tasks, what you really want to be doing when you have when you're feeling the inclination to do the death zone tasks, like going on TikTok, watching pornography, going on Instagram, is just accept that, like, okay, I'm a bit tired today, my willpower's not very high, let's just watch some unproductive TV, you know, let's less out, because it's much better to do that for like a couple of hours than do this for a couple of hours. And the trouble is with these unproductive tasks, the reason why we don't really, we'll end up doing the death zone tasks rather than the unproductive tasks, is because we can't face the idea of not being productive. You know, we feel like we have to be doing something. We have to be jumping to these tasks over here, like as soon as possible. So what we'll do is we'll say to ourselves, oh, I'll go on Instagram for 5 minutes, or I'll check Hinge for 5 minutes, and we'll end up on there for half an hour at least, you know. Or, you know, if it's TikTok or something like that, you know, most likely several hours very quickly. But we had the idea in our heads that we're only going to look at it for 5 minutes, and then we can get up to doing this stuff. And the trouble with the unproductive indulgences is that they do require a kind of sacrifice of time in advance. So what I mean by that is, like, if you sit down to watch a Netflix show, you know that you're not going to do any work for at least one episode, you know. So you already know that in advance, if that makes sense. And it's difficult to make yourself say, okay, I'm not going to be productive for 1 hour while I watch this. But my perspective is, it's much better to just be frank with yourself and say, okay, look, I'm not going to do the most productive work right this second, but I'd rather do something that's kind of okay but not productive, as opposed to going on TikTok, basically. And it's great because there's not actually a huge amount of willpower required to watch Netflix rather than going on TikTok. The only thing that's required really is just being humble and being honest and thinking, look, I'm not Andrew Tate, you know, let's take it one step at a time. The most important thing is I just don't go on this short form content. You know, it's still not great to waste loads of time watching Netflix, I get that, but let's just be real with ourselves, you know, and then just sacrifice that hour and watch Netflix. Obviously, people get addicted to Netflix shows, you know, they'll be like, oh, one more episode. You know, so like I say, it's still not perfect, but it's, like, I know I'm saying the same thing again, but it's just so important. It's still so much better than this, you know. And often I'll find it's much easier to unplug yourself from this and go on to one of these higher tasks than it is to unplug yourself from the death zone, to go on to any of these tasks. And I also think the other thing is, it's going to be much easier to get yourself to do all these tasks, and you're going to do them a lot better as well, because you haven't put your brain in this zone of just being fried by short form content. So you know, you can watch a bit of TV, watch a bit of Netflix, and I think you'll find it easier to do these sort of harder tasks later on in the day. Okay, so this is the unproductive tasks, you know. The next stage is just, I'll put this as like a neutral. This is basically resting. So this is stuff that's not productive, but you don't get sort of dopamine from it. Like with both of these things, you do get easy dopamine. You know, even with unproductive indulgences, you will get kind of easy dopamine from watching a Netflix show. You know, you will still get easy dopamine from watching, even if it's a long video. You're still getting easy dopamine from watching a long video on YouTube. Oh, by the way, one quick endorsement actually, because the reason I have a cup of sugary tea is because Chris from First Man, he said that if you ever felt the desire to masturbate or like watch porn or whatever, what he'd do is he'd just have a cup of sugary tea and he'd feel a lot better. And I think that was a similar sort of philosophy towards like what I'm talking about here. I had realised when he gets the desire to watch porn or masturbate, it's just because he's a bit tired. He needs a little bit of a pick me up, but he doesn't need to go all the way and watch porn. He just treats himself a little bit and then he's back on track. So anyway, yeah. So the resting stuff, you don't get, you know, with all this stuff, you get some varying degrees of dopamine, which are some are more damaging than the others. But in this, you get virtually no, as I understand it, sort of free dopamine. You know, you're just sitting there and it's a bit boring, basically. That's basically what I see boredom as a lot of the time. To really dumb it down, is like you're just not getting dopamine from the activity that you're doing. However, it's still really good to rest because it will allow you to do deep work tasks much more effectively. And if you rest, you'll go about your day, you'll be much more clear-headed, you'll be much more happy, you know, you'll be much more sort of alert. So I think it is quite, there and then, you're not doing anything while you're resting, of course, But it means, but when you go into your day, go about your day, after you've rested, you'll be more productive. Because you've allowed yourself to properly reset. So resting activities, I mean, there's a variety of things. One thing that I quite like to do is yoga nidra, which is this kind of it's not really a meditation, but I guess in layman's terms, it is sort of meditation, where you basically just lie down and you focus on different parts of your body, and it gives you a kind of really sort of resets your nervous system and stuff like that. You can just look up sort of free videos on YouTube to do it. It's quite a fun thing to try, but also it could just be like having a nap, just lying down for half an hour with your eyes closed. Even listening to a podcast or something while you're doing it, just to drift off. Or it could even just be sitting down in your room and just not doing anything, or I don't know, sitting outside in a garden if you have a garden, or just go sitting down on a bench somewhere and just chilling out. Just anything where you're not really exerting any effort on the body or the mind. And this will sort of reset you to allow, like I say, to allow you to do these deeper tasks. And often, if you're stuck if you're stuck doing these kind of unproductive tasks, it's a good idea to go on and just have a rest. And this could be either of them. So I remember last night, because we have this weird thing about naps where we think, like, people say stuff like, oh, don't have a nap after 1 o'clock in the afternoon. But I actually think, like, if you're tired, if you're genuinely tired, just have a little rest, like have a nap. It doesn't matter what time of day it is. Like, I mean, it's funny, we have I'm staying with my parents' house at the moment, where we grew up, and we've got a dog, like a little Westie, and he'll just like sleep whenever he wants, because he's a dog, he doesn't, whatever. But, he still goes to bed at night and sleeps, and he's fine. And it's funny, I do think if we just treat ourselves more like our pets, we'd be in a much better position. But anyway, like, yeah, if you are tired and you can't get yourself to do anything productive, and you're just stuck in this kind of limbo state, just have a quick nap. Like, it's not the end of the world. I remember last night, this is a great example. It was about 10 o'clock in the evening, and I was quite tired, and I was ready to go to bed, but I had to pick my sister up from a party. And often when you gotta stay up but you're tired, it's tempting to just go on your phone, get some quick dopamine from that. But I actually decided, like, if I'm genuinely tired, doesn't matter what the time is. Let's just go to bed for like an hour, and then wake up when you need to go and collect her, and just go back to bed. So that's what I did. I just lay down, did a yoga nidra meditation. And then 11 o'clock, I just got up again. Felt really good, felt really awake, as I was driving. Got back to picked up my sister, got back home, had a fun time while driving back because I was awake. I hadn't wasted all my mental energy on TikTok. And then I went to bed and fell straight to sleep again. No trouble getting sleep, even though I'd had a nap before. So that's a good example, guys, of that same thing in use. Okay, so that's resting. Now the rest of this is a bit more self-explanatory, and I think really to truly master productivity, I think most of it is getting this side right. And if you do this side right of kind of the non-productive tasks, you will get this stuff. This stuff will just come naturally. So what is this stuff? So this is productive shallow tasks is number one. So this is stuff that it is productive, but is quite sort of casual. It's quite sort of easy, low level productive tasks. And so this stuff like just tidying a room, I've written sort of looking over notes. If you're at school or you're at university, this could just be like you looking over notes for a upcoming exam that you've got. or it could be checking emails if you work in an office. It's basically a good way to think about it. Is it's stuff that you can do while listening to music or checking your phone. Because the deep work stuff here, really the defining thing of deep work is you can't check your phone while you're doing it. You have to just be basically blended into the task you're doing. And then I've included kind of exercise here. So I think all exercise comes into productive tasks. But I've got things like just going on a walk is kind of a shallow exercise task. I'll say, going to the gym with headphones. I don't know, I guess there's some bodybuilders who did that and like really, really hench. But I think generally, if you're listening to a podcast while you're working out, it puts you, or even music, it puts you in a bit more of a shallow state of mind while you're doing it. You're not so sort of blended in with what you're doing. I think just as a side note, I think I wouldn't worry too much about whether it's deep work or not deep work when it comes to exercise. The most important thing with productivity as it regards to exercise is just making sure you're doing it every day to whatever level. So there we go, that's the productive shallow tasks. And finally we've got the deep work tasks. And obviously everyone talks about this book, but it's a great resource. Is the book Just Deep Work by Cal Newport. And he talks a lot about this in more detail. But basically, this is the work where you can't be disturbed while you're doing it. And I've got two examples here. I'll say a few more. Basically, writing an essay. So let's say you want to write. You're at university, you're at school. You've got to write an essay for a subject. That I think would be a deep work task. Now, don't get me wrong. And I include myself in this category. Most people will. When I was at school, most people would do that as a shallow task. So they'd write an essay, but they'd check their phone while they're doing it, or they'd have some music playing on in the background. And it would be a kind of shallow task. But I think an essay is one of those things where it's much more beneficial if you get into a deep state of mind while you're doing it. Because you'll just do it quicker, but you'll also do it to a much higher quality. So that's like a deep work task. And the other thing I've said is like doing an online exam. So like again, if you're at university, or even like an in-person exam, to be honest. If you're at university, you've got an online exam coming up. You do that with complete focus. You're not checking your phone. You're not listening to music or whatever. Again, don't get me wrong. People will do that in the shallow tasks if they don't really understand deep work and how beneficial it is. But I think ideally it should go in the deep work category. And if you're an office worker, you've got some important reports to do or whatever, that would be in here. If you're let's say if you're a YouTuber, it would literally just be like recording a video. You're not distracted by people while you're recording your videos. While you're scripting, you're not checking your phone, you're just getting that deep state of mind. If you're, I'm trying to think of another example. If you're a musician, that would just be, you lock yourself in your room and, you record a song. You're not kind of just sitting there, checking your phone while you're recording something. You're just doing that one task. And then I've got sort of a small aside of like exercise stuff here. So I said like a super focused workout. So where you get into the gym, you know sort of music you're listening to, you're just in the zone. You're just doing the exercise. When you're not working, you're just sitting there. You're not on your phone. You're just completely molded to the task you're doing. And I've written here boxing match as well. That's a bit of a funny example, but like something where like it's like quite high caliber. There's no distraction. It's that kind of exercise. Going on like a marathon or like a triathlon or something like that. Is like where you're really pushing your body to the extreme. That's what I would say is like a deep exercise work task. But again, with all of this deep work task stuff, don't focus too much on doing it as such. The most important thing is to get rid of the death zone tasks. Just get rid of these, and you'll find the deep work tasks easy to do, and even the shadow tasks. But until like these are sort of eradicated, there's no point putting mental energy into doing these. Still use like the mental energy that you've got to be productive, but put that into getting rid of these. By instead watching, just putting them into the unproductive tasks, or if you can, just when you notice you're inclined to going into the death zone tasks, just have a rest. Yeah, and that is it, guys. So that's my 5 things. That's my 5 sort of categories of productivity. I realised that I said I was going to talk about all of them in very vague detail and then go into huge detail afterwards. But I've basically just done it all in one, which is actually better that way, I think. So yeah, it's really interesting. I might timestamp this so you guys can really chop it up properly. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, and yeah.